You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. It's Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com, thechrisvossshow.com. What can you say, man? It's once the opera lady says it, it becomes official. Welcome to the big show, my family and friends. We certainly appreciate you guys being here. As always, we're bringing you the most amazing minds, brilliant authors, Pulitzer Prize winners, billionaires, CEOs, you name it. All the great people who tell all the great stories. And as I always say, it's kind of become a hallmark of the Chris Voss Show. Stories are the great lessons of life. They are the owner's manual of life, and it's how we share our stories, whether it's through fiction or nonfiction or just sharing our life journey is what we overcome and how we overcome it to help instruct others on how to learn lessons in life. And that's how we learn through stories, whether it's film, movie, TV, books, whatever the case may be. This is how we learn, sharing each other's stories and going, wow, I can learn something from that. If you don't learn anything from anything, well, maybe you're part of the problem, as my psychiatrist likes to say. We have a great, amazing author who's multi-book author. He's written a lot of great works, and he's on with two of his latest offerings he's put out this year. The first one is The Black Seas of Infinity. Daniel Henk, or otherwise known as illustrator Dan Henk, is on the show with us today. He also has a book that he put out January 4th, 2023, The Never Dead, which is, I think that talks about my love life. Or wait, no, maybe it's the opposite. And that he also put out as well with a bunch of other people. And he's going to be talking to us about his book. You'll get a chance to meet him. His early career included drawing political cartoons for Madcap magazine and illustrating Maximum Rock and Roll. In 1997, after getting stabbed by a crackhead, he moved to New York City. Wait, he moved to New York City after that? That sounds like a bad way to get closer to people that are cracking.
In DC. DC was horrible. That's the Marionberry years.
Ah, there you go. Well, there you go. That explains a lot. Thank you, CIA. There he produced artwork for the bands Shai Hulud,
yeah.
Indecision, Koshari, Unsound, Coalesce, Most Precious Blood, Locked in Vacancy, Beyond Reason, and Zombie Apocalypse. All sound like really well-balanced bands. He had a brain cancer in 2001, and his wife died in a hit and run in 2007. Life is a rocky road sometimes, he has to say. His heavily illustrated anthology, The Never Dead, featuring 14 authors and 16 stories just debuted, and he re-attained his rights and massively re-edited his debut novel, The Black Seas of Infinity, for re-release, and we're going to be talking about those books today. Welcome to the show, Dan. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming, and give us a .com. So where do you want people to find you on the interwebs?
Check out my website, danhank.com. That's everything's there. All my links, my blog, everything.
There you go. And so how many books you've written? You've got quite a few books and offering on your website there.
Well, I have 3 that are full novels, and then I've been in a bunch of story collections and magazines. But I have 3 that are fully mine, and then I have one that's kind of like Twilight Zone, Outer Limits style anthology with all short stories. And I contributed that, but I had a bunch of authors too.
There you go. So on this latest offering, The Black Seas of Infinity, give us like a 30,000 overview of that, if you would.
It's apocalyptic kind of. My editor calls it speculative fiction, and I was like, "What the fuck is that?" He said, "Well, it's just you combine everything." I don't know if I can curse this, but I combine everything. So there's like some sci-fi, some horror, all that sort of stuff. But it basically deals with a guy who works for the government. They recover crashed spacecraft, and they hide it all from the people, the populace, and then the whole government collapses. They steal something, and goes to the run, and then, surprise, surprise, the aliens they stole from came back.
It's always those aliens coming back.
Yeah.
The cover, I must say, is quite provocative. Do you want to describe the cover for people?
Yeah, it's my late wife. She did a bit of like alternative modeling, and one was she. I think I forget, it was River or something or other was a photographer, and it's her like pouring like milk on her body, and I used that as reference to make a painting, and I made a painting where instead of milk is blood.
Oh, there you go. So that intertwines a little bit with maybe what goes on in the book.
Yeah, it's the main character, and I don't want people to think it's me because it's not me, but it's like a very like nihilistic version of me. But in it, his wife dies, and like he just hates everything.
Wow.
And he has like dreams about this and like visions about this, and you kind of have to delve into the book to see the intricacies of the whole situation. But he doesn't know if he's like losing it. He starts to have like waking dreams where he sees his wife.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that obviously we talked to you lost your wife in I think 2007?
Yeah, 2007.
Was this maybe part of the journey that you went on of grief and sorrow and things of that nature, or was this maybe a way for you maybe to expel or experience that or cleanse that from yourself, or you know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Well, I would say, especially like later reference when you read it and you go, oh, that's where I was at the time. But I had the story and I developed the story before I ever even met her. But I incorporated her into the story, or like this character's version of her into the story, and I included more elements as it went along. I mean, this thing has been. I originally started this back when I was 15. I wanted to be a comic artist, and I go to like I lived in Gainesville, Florida, which is pretty much like trash, but there are a bunch of people that work at like bookstores and like comic shops, and they're like indie artists, and that's when you have that giant boom with like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So all these people were working full time, and they were super nice. He gave me like, I was a little bratty kid, but they gave me lots of advice and be like, I use this, and they look at it and they go, well, you should try this. But it really helped me out. Mm-hmm. And that story has kind of evolved over time.
Awesome sauce. So, tell us more about the protagonist in the story.
Well, the protagonist, he works for the government. He works and whenever I do anything, I'm almost OCD, so I did kind of a deep dive into this. Like, read a bunch of people that at least say they worked for the government, for Project Blue Book and recovering Summer Roswell and stuff like that. And so this guy works for the government, and the theory, if aliens are real, if this whole thing is real, then the theory is stuff's recovered, is brought to a warehouse, and they kind of partition it out, and different people work in different projects, but don't know what connects it all. Like that's what they did with the Manhattan Project. So the government does do that, and so this guy is one of those guys working for the government, and they have a recovered spacecraft, and he's working on it. And he finds something in there, and he's kind of like he's not a nice guy, so he doesn't get along with his coworkers. He eventually gets fired, and he's like, I'm going back and I'm stealing that, and so he goes back to steal it, but while he's stealing it, the whole government falls apart. So at first he's wondering why there's like nobody on the roads and everything's closed, the local militias and stuff, and then it just gets crazier from there.
Wow, it sounds like quite the journey. What were some of the things that gave you ideas on the book that contributed to it?
Well, like I said, I had this stuff since I was 15. So kind of the idea has evolved over time, but the core elements stayed more or less the same. And then as you go through life and all this stuff happens to you, you go, hey, well, I should incorporate that, or that had a big impact. So they'll probably reach the audience.
There you go. Now, your other book, The Never Dead, looks like this is a compilation with several different authors that jumped into it. Give us an overview of that.
It's basically kind of like Twilight Zone, Outer Limits. Like they're all little like not necessarily horror stories, but dark stories.
Mm-hmm.
And I do a lot of illustrations for like magazines and bands. And I've done plenty of book covers. And what I said is I was like, I don't have a lot of money, but I'll bet I can trade original artwork that I did for an author in exchange for a short story. And fortunately, a lot of them were into that. So I gave them the artwork and they gave me the short story. And I kind of edited through it. There were a couple people that I was like, yeah, man. I try not to say your story sucks, but I try to say it didn't really fit the anthology. But the ones I liked, I put in there.
So people kind of applied and went through it, and so it's kind of like an experience, like you said, the Twilight Zone. So it's little short stories, I guess, of
think Richard Matheson or like Stephen King short stories, like I said, like Twilight Zone or Tales from the Crypt or Outer Limits.
So there's 16 tales of horror and woe that are put in the book.
That's my tagline. Yeah, that's my tagline.
16 tales of horror and woe are ensconced in here. It sounds like my first 16 marriages.
Were you really married 16 times?
No, it's a callback joke on the show. I throw out random, like, it sounds like my first 5 marriages. And, we just do different numbers every time. The joke is that I've never been married. So,
Yeah. Well, I tell people everything good in life hurts. I should know I was married.
That's true. You went and got stabbed. It sounds like you've been through some experiences in your life. Tell us a little bit more about how some of those experiences led to kind of have you written and how you lived your life. I know you're a big tattoo artist as well.
Right. Yeah, I own a shop here in Long Beach, New York. And it's called The Abyss Tattoo.
The Abyss Tattoo. Yeah. That's
actually where I met my wife. She was I didn't own the shop, but at the time I was working in another shop, and she was a counter person, and I kept trying to talk to her, but she's an immigrant from Colombia, so there was a language barrier, But when she finally realized that in my awkward way I was trying to hit on her, then she started talking to me.
There you go. And I've seen some of your artwork that you have for tattoo work on the website as well. This is quite interesting, all the stuff here. I might have some nightmares after this.
Well, I had 15 minutes of fame in the tattoo world back in 2009. I was in all the magazines, traveling all over the world. Yeah, people would say, "Hey, we do my convention." I'm like, well, I don't know if I can afford it. They're like, we'll buy your plane ticket, we'll pay for your hotel room, we'll pay for your booth. You just show up. I was like, okay, I can do that.
There you go. So what got you into this horror genre? I see there's also that kind of theme running through your tattoos. I don't see a lot of daisies and flowers and positive vibes going on here. It's a bit of darkness and horror. What do you think contributes to you kind of enjoying this genre?
Well, I think it's what you said, basically, which is everything's a story. And the stories that really grab me are the ones that have kind of a dark twist to them. I feel like that's more realistic. That's more what life is, the good guy doesn't always win.
That's true.
And I grew up on isolated military bases everywhere because of my dad's army. And we didn't even have a TV, so I just go to the library. I check out this giant stack of books. I have them all read within a week. Like in 4th grade, I was reading adult level. And I always my favorites were sci-fi and horror. They always really grabbed me. And I used to play soldier in the abandoned training grounds, near the base we lived at. We run around with bottle rockets and shoot at each other and pretend we're troops and stuff. But I always imagined these fantastical worlds all around me. And I think that kind of transferred into my my love for this stuff.
There you go. There's something to say about not having a TV. You got to go create your own imagination, your own world. Maybe more kids need that. That's how I kind of was as a kid, where I was you run around, and because you have to create your own imagination in the world and stuff, you you develop that. But if you don't, you're just sitting there in front of the TV going, ugh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I agree with that. I mean, it's also, it was a different era. So you didn't have like helicopter parents and stuff. So basically, my parents would be like, all right, there's a 6, see you at 6. So I get like on my BMX bike and I like bike downtown and I bike everywhere. Like we had a tree fort, like we went to the scrap lumber yard and we grabbed stuff there. We're like building a tree fort. It's just like, we're finding ways to amuse ourselves, and we didn't have TV. We didn't have video games. We didn't have a computer. I mean, I'm old, so this is like back in the early '80s.
Yeah, we're both old, buddy. We're coming from that era, that's for sure. Yeah, it's and so it seems like it's worked out really well for you. You've used it for your work, and how many total books do you have? I'm looking at them here on the website.
Well, the ones that I put out there are like a solid, like 300-page, all me, are like 3.
Okay.
But there's a bunch I've been in where I have a short story, like a Splatterpunk did one called Bloodstains. Sorry, Henk is a publisher. It's called Bloodstains. I have a story in there. I've done stories in magazines. I've done stories in like various anthologies. So, but just mine alone, 3 books.
Wow. That's pretty good. And then you've got the anthologies there as well. Do you ever think you'd write a book like Martha Stewart, Positive Daisies and Roses and Love and Peace and Happiness?
What, you're saying these books are positive?
I don't know. I didn't mean to play that at all. But, I'm a Metallica fan. And, there's something about cathartic about, sometimes darkness and dealing with the hard edges of life and stuff, and there's something cathartic about it where like people will be like, I'll listen to something really heavy and you're talking about some kind of dark stuff, and you feel better afterwards. You're kind of like, I feel less depressed now, cleansed all that. I've exercised
back in the day they told great stories.
They did, yeah.
Like I just, after Injustice for All, I just pretend they died.
A lot of people feel that way. Yeah. It definitely has changed over the years with them. So on these books, what do you feel appeals to most of your readers on the 2 new books you put out this year?
Well, that's the kind of weird thing. Like for instance, it sounds like I'm going off topic, but I'm not. So when I went to art school and I do stuff, and people are like, "Oh, I love your style," I'm like, "What style? I'm just illustrating what I see." But you put yourself into the way that you envision the world. So when I first put out my books, it was just like, "Hey, I like this, so I'm sure everyone will like this." That's not true at all. But I put it out, and I over time I tried to not change the topics or anything, but angle a little bit more so more people, it grabs their attention, then immediately run it off.
There you go. And sometimes you just have to find your audience and build it, right?
That's true.
You have to curate your audience, get them interested, find the people that like you, and then hopefully word of mouth spreads and more people refer you and stuff, and you can get into it and some more. So you've been through an incredible journey, and how do you stay positive? How do you stay, how do you bounce back from some of the trials and tribulations you've been served in life?
Well, I figure that nobody really cares in the end except for you. So if you fail and you don't make it, maybe a couple of your friends are like, well, he was talented, that's tragedy, but nobody really cares. End of the day, nobody cares. So I remember first when I had brain cancer, and I was doing, I was painting a cover for the band Shai Halud. And, I was like 35 hours to a 40-hour painting. And I called it Matt Fox, the main guy being Shai Halud, from a hospital bed. I'm like, I have cancer. I'm in the hospital, but I'm going to finish your painting. He's like, just get better. Just get better. I'm like, no, I'm going to finish your painting. I'm like, I might die, but I'm going to finish your painting. So I just feel you have to do stuff. And part of the impetus for the, getting the books out as much as I always had that in mind. and then it's kind of it's a long, complicated road. But I ended up tattooing. That blew up in the tattoo industry, so I got all wrapped up in that. Then my wife died in a hit and run. So when she died,
Wow.
that combined with brain cancer, I was like, life is short. I could die tomorrow. I got to get this done.
Yeah. That kind of gives you an outlook on life of realizing how fleeting it is, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. And how important
they're there 1 minute, they're gone the next.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you've just got to get it done and all that good stuff. The book that you put out, The Never Dead, I guess there's a lot of illustrations in it from some of your artwork.
Oh yeah, well, like I said, originally I wanted to be a comic artist. So even like when I first I went to art school and my teacher said, if you want to make an artist, you got to move to New York. So I moved to New York. I moved on like a 10-year-old motorcycle, everything I owned in a backpack, just drove to New York. And I remember I interviewed with like DC Comics, and that's right when they almost went bankrupt. Like the movie saved them,
Yeah.
And like I was trying so hard. I finally managed to find a guy at Pratt that worked for them, and he hooked me up with the interview. And the interview didn't really go the way I liked because they want me to draw their characters. Like they pulled out a Superman comic and Superman punching Lex Luthor, and they're like, "You want to do this?" I was like, "No." They're like, "We don't have a job for you."
Wow.
So, and then like an interview with Penguin Books. Penguin pays a lot for a book cover, but you might get a book cover like every year and a half. I was like, I can't live off that.
Yeah.
So I love to do illustration. Not to get off topic there, but I love to do illustrations, and I like to write as well. And I was like, well, when I write, I'm going to do a bunch of illustrations and kind of bring it to life.
Mm-hmm. Have you thought about doing a comic book series of horror?
I thought. See, here's the thing: it's like a full page where 11 by 17 is like the standard working size, and the ones where it's like one image for the entire page is called a splash page.
Yeah.
And one of those takes me 3 days to do.
Oh, wow.
So when I did, because I'll pencil it. I even remember when I interviewed with DC Comics, and they're like, "Your pencils are very detailed. Most inkers can't handle them." I'm like, "Oh, I'll ink them myself." Like, "Oh, no. I mean, what they're worried about is they want 24 pages a month, every single month. And, if you run behind with that, they kind of get screwed. They don't make any money. So, there's a lot that goes into it. So even if you do it all the time and the speed through repetition, it's still hard to crank out 24 if you spend an entire month doing nothing but working on the comic.
Yeah. A lot of art that works. I know we had Daphne Byrne from Hill House Comics. That was the title of the book. It was Laura Marks from Hill House Comics. And I guess Joe Hill's a big horror comic.
Oh, yeah, I met him. Yeah, he's a nice guy.
Yeah.
It's like Stephen King's son, yeah.
Yeah, and I guess they do really well. We interviewed them, and I was like, holy crap! The book was amazing to look through.
Well, it does if you have something that catches people's attention, like if it's Joe Hill or like Del Toro did book. So if you have something that catches people's attention, like Gerard, what's the guy from My Chemical Romance? Gerard Way, I think. He did the Umbrella Academy. So if you have something that makes people take a look and it's quality, then you're good to go. But there's lots of stuff out there that's quality that nobody ever looked at.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. But, sometimes you have to build the audience. And like I said, you have to curate it and stuff. So, maybe there's a future there. But it sounds like you're kicking ass on what you're doing. What do you have working on in the future? Is there any additions to your book collection that you're putting out now?
Yeah, I'm always working on something. Like my girlfriend tells me that I do way too much. But
it's all about time, right? There's only so much time.
Yeah, well, I write, I draw, I have a podcast, I tattoo, I help run a tattoo shop, I help manage it and pay people. So it's like I'm doing a lot of stuff all the time.
Yeah. What do you talk about on the podcast? Let's get a plug in for that.
It's called Skull Sessions with Henk. It's I interview like artists and authors, mainly authors, because I do a lot of like author conventions now, and I'll meet them like, you should be on my podcast, and like they'll be on my podcast, and then what I love to do is like I kind of took this from John Stossel, the whole like put up lots of imagery and stuff like that, and I was like, yeah, that's a great idea. So if they talk about a book, boom, it's on the screen. If they talk about a movie, I try and clip a little scene from that movie and put it on the screen. But yeah, we talk about like what led them to where they are. Like some people, it's more like, what techniques do you use? Some people, it's more like, hey, well, what made you go for this job in the first place? And they'll be like, well, I was a medical technician and I was always around lots of blood, and maybe that should have been a sign.
Yeah. So what genre do you talk about? All sorts of books and books authors on your show, or is this horror genre or?
Well, it's mainly horror. Also, I focus on sci-fi. So, but it'll be like dark sci-fi, like Event Horizon or Alien or something like that. But, that's not that I'm necessarily turning people away. It's just those are the people that gravitate towards whatever they're on.
There you go. And so it's fun, man. You're doing so much, and I think what you're doing is really enjoying life and make sure you're maximizing, because you've seen the darkness of life. What was it like going through cancer? I imagine that had a contribution on your outlook in life.
Well, it sucked. But
yeah.
I had headaches, and I was broke at the time, and so I went to like a local like clinic, and they said, "Oh, you got migraines," and then the headaches got worse, and I went to a pharmacy, and they couldn't even read its handwriting, and so I had to go to a more expensive clinic. And they said, "Oh, you're dehydrated. Call us tomorrow. It's even worse." And the next day, like me and my girl, we had Chinese food the day before. The next day, I was throwing it up. I was like hanging over like a bathroom sink.
Wow.
I wanted to shoot myself in the mouth. I felt like I had a jackhammer to the back of my head.
Wow.
And so then we went to Bellevue Hospital, and while we're going to Bellevue, like she's trying to guide me straight. I can't even walk straight. I'm walking sideways. And
wow.
I get in there, and they're like, "What do you do?" I said, "Well, I do Muay Thai." They're like, "Oh, it's a brain bleed." They put me in the CAT scan. They go, "Oh, it's cancer."
Wow.
And I was like, "Okay." And they're like, "Well, it was called medulloblastoma. It's a slow growing tumor." They're like, "Yeah, it would have burst open and you would have been dead. You probably had about 2 weeks."
Holy crap! So I mean, you've gone through some things where you've learned to really appreciate your value and time in life.
Right.
Yeah. And I think you have
so.
this outlook where you're so busy now, and you try and enjoy your life and get a lot done.
That's true. I also think one other thing I was going to say about the brain cancer was, so they said, it's brain surgery, so you have about a 50-50 chance of making it, and we have to operate on you in 4 days. And my girl started crying, and she's like, "Oh, you don't care?" I'm like, "Oh, of course I care, but what am I going to do?" And I called my parents, and they're like, "Well, we come see you, but last minute takes are expensive." So kind of like me and my parents don't get along well anyways. Like I turned 18, they kicked me out of the house and moved. They're like super conservative, super religious. I got into punk rock. They're like, "All right, devil inspired, he's out."
Yeah, punk rock, that'll do it.
I had a blue mohawk and a spiky leather jacket and comment. I looked like a British punk rocker. But I mean, I got a high, grade point average, high GPA. And I remember I talked to my guidance counselor, and I was like trying to get like a loan for college or like a grant or something. Mm-hmm. She said, "Get ready for a cure of pumping gas, because that's all you're ever going to do."
What the hell?
I still remember what she looks like. I remember her name. I remember.
You should send her some of your work and say, "Yeah, I seem to be doing well. How's your pumping gas thing working out there, buddy?" Yeah, that's not a very nice guidance counselor. What the hell? That's not even guidance. It's just cursing you with something or trying to. Well, I'm glad you didn't listen to her and you rose above it. It seems like you've had quite the journey of resilience and loss, and it's an interesting thing. You got stabbed, cancer, you lost your wife. I mean, there's a lot of grief and heartache where people that go through stuff like that would just give up and just say, whatever. Maybe like the character in your book who's a bit of a nihilist after going through some of the similar things that you put in your latest book.
Yeah, well, I think they kind of like if you do a deep dive in psychology of people, like that's a path I could have gone down. Yeah. And I know I was feeling more nihilistic when I wrote, but I mean, I don't hate people, but I'm like, I can see how that leads to it. I can see how people get a certain way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I didn't used to hate people, and then I started getting to know people. I'm just kidding. Just some people. I started watching the news. Right. So, maybe turn that news off every now and then. It's good to stay informed, though, people.
It's probably not even real anyway, so.
There you go. So, what do you want to, is there anything more we should tease out about the two books, The Black Seas Infinity and The Never Dead, before we go?
No, I think definitely check those books out. Like the Black Seas Infinity, when I got the rights back, I was like, I should give people a reason why they should check this out if they've already seen it. Mm-hmm. So I did do a massive, re-edit and rewrite and everything. I figure I'm a much better author now than I was when I first wrote it. But it's like, I should give some like cool stuff to like make them really want to check it out, even more. So like I included a whole bunch of new illustrations. I included like a whole backstory. It's like I call it the story of the projects, where I say, it started out as this. These are some of my early drawings. These are some of my later drawings. These are some of the drawings I interviewed with DC Comics with. And so I just saw how it evolved over time.
There you go. Well, it's been fun having you on the show. Give us the final pitch out as we go out, Dan, for people to order up your books, check out some of your other artistry work.
Well, I think, like, I'm a big fan of H.P. Lovecraft, and he has a great quote, right, where he says, "Life is indeed comic, but the joke is on mankind."
There you go. I think man can learn from his history as the man never learns from his history. Dan, give us your .com so people can find you on the interwebs, please.
It's danhenk.com. It's DanHenk. It's some weird German last name. So danhenk.com.
There you go. Well, thanks for persevering through everything you've gone through. You're a light in the world, and you're inspiring other people. And keep up with the artwork.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
There you go. It'd be great too, is if you did like maybe a little movie, like maybe a little TV series, Twilight Zone sort of thing on the book there.
Well, I do book trailers for all my books.
Oh, do you?
Yeah. And,
wow.
I figure it like gives you a little more of like an insight into what's going on.
Oh yeah.
And I like one of my books. It's called Down Highways in the Dark by Demons Driven. And it's all short stories. And I got an option by somebody. It wasn't Netflix, but it was kind of like Netflix to like make that into an episode of a series. It never went anywhere. I didn't make like crazy money off of it, but that was out there.
You never know. I mean, those options are pretty fun because people option them, and then sometimes they don't use them, and then you can just keep reselling them. So there you go. There you go. We have a lot of authors that come on the show that do that. Thank you very much, Dan, for coming on the show. We really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me.
There you go. And thanks for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, YouTube.com/Chris Voss, and Chris Voss 1 on the Tickety Tockety. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe. And we'll see you guys next time. And